An excerpt from former Vice President Kamala Harris's upcoming memoir is revealing her take on her 107-day-long campaign and President Biden's July decision to exit the race. She writes, "It's Joe and Jill's decision. We all said that like a mantra, as if we'd all been hypnotized. Was it grace or was it recklessness? In retrospect, I think it was recklessness. The stakes were simply too high. This wasn't a choice that should have been left to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision." Megan Hayes and Maura Gillespie are back with me. So, Megan, what is your reaction to the excerpt in The Atlantic and specifically that comment?
Look, I mean, I think she's entitled to her perspective. Everyone else has been writing these different books that have come out about what happened on the campaign, what happened in those 107 days. So it's important for her to get her own voice and her own narrative out there. I do wish that she would use her platform a little bit differently and be fighting back on Donald Trump's disastrous economic policies and speak to the time we're in and not continue to look backwards. But again, it's her perspective. I have a really unique perspective and I've worked on both sides for a sitting vice president and a sitting president. And I'm one of a handful of people who've done that. And her complaints about the administration or the Biden team is, it's valid. It's a tale as old as time. We experienced it when we were in the vice president's office too. So, I just think it's all of her perspective. I just wish she'd be using her platform at this moment in time to be fighting back on Donald Trump.
Well, it's interesting, Maura, because Harris wonders if she should have talked to Biden about not running, but then she acknowledged that she was in the worst position to make that case since it would be seen as self-serving. Should someone have convinced Biden not to run earlier, and who should that person have been?
Absolutely. And I'm not one to go and blame any family members, but I do think that that's a conversation in-house. They talked about it at length, that it was a family discussion. So someone maybe should have mentioned, are you up for this? And are you up for it in a way that can be effective? And then I think it goes to, his inner circle. And I think that the very insulated inner circle he had, they were also very self-serving. I mean, I think then you look at what Jen O'Malley Dillon and Anita Dunn did, even leading up to that debate in June, where obviously then he, had to bow out of running, and that's where Kamala Harris stepped in. But why push him to do that? Why push him to do that knowing the schedule he had beforehand, his travel schedule overseas? Mm-hmm. And so I just think that there's a lot of questions there. And then for them to go on and then work on her campaign, I understand you can't overhaul everything, but I do think that those motives are something that we would want to know answers to. But also, why would they then be tapped for Democrats to go run in campaigns? I mean, for Republicans, sure, that's probably good news. But I think for Democrats who are looking to revamp and to find strong leadership, I don't think the likes of those people should be part of their, part of the team.
So, Megan, you said you've worked for a sitting vice president and president, and you understand the difference between the two and maybe the occasional friction. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth on that level, but Harris accused the White House of not pushing back on attacks in the press, not giving her more of a role at events. And she writes, "Getting anything positive said about my work or any defense against untrue attacks was almost impossible." She also points out she was only briefly mentioned at the end of Biden's video announcing he was leaving the race. So the question is, did the Biden team not do enough to set Harris up for success, even if she'd had a longer campaign?
It's interesting. I was there in the beginning of the administration, so I'm not sure exactly what was going on at the end. But I know if you look back in time when I worked for Vice President Biden, there was constant battles with him and the Obama team and our team and their team. And it was interesting that the same things happened. But the vice president does have her own staff. She does have her own communication staff. She has the things to be able to push back on these messages herself within her own apparatus. So, I'm not sure exactly what happened during why she wasn't mentioned more in his video. It's just interesting. Why are we hearing about these complaints now? And if you want to be a leader and you want to run again or run for office, I would like to have someone who can speak truth to power. So I would hope that she would have lunch with with the president frequently. Why wasn't she able to have those conversations? And I think that's something that maybe instead of blaming everyone else, that we look at ourselves and think, I should have said something. And I wish that there just was more accountability. But again, I just wish she has a very strong platform and a very big following. And I wish she was using that to fight back on the economic policies that we're fighting right now and all these different policy issues that we are moving forward as a party with Democrats. And I wish she'd be more of a leader in that way instead of looking backwards.
Well, look, she may get there. So more of the question is, what are the lessons to take away from 2024 as both parties are looking for their new leader?
Right. And I think that what Kamala Harris is doing maybe gives them, okay, here's looking what happened. How do we move forward? And, the Democratic strategists should be looking at that, of what worked, what didn't work. Not necessarily the timing, because obviously, you can't change that. You can't change the amount of time she had to run. But what was successful and what wasn't. I think we learned that it wasn't successful to, despite what the economic numbers showed, to gaslight people into telling them that they were doing better than they felt. So I think that some of these things are what's going to be important looking forward. But I also think in how we talk about one another. We're looking at, we just, in our last segment, we talked about leadership and what's required in this moment. And so I do think that what we're looking for, the large swath of the American people are frustrated by this toxicity and how divisive it is. And so if there's somebody who wants to step up and say, listen, I know that it's bad. I know that it feels bad, but we can do this better. I would welcome that in a heartbeat. And I think many people would.
All right. Megan Hayes and Maura Gillespie. Ladies, good to see you. See you next week.